Welcome to the Honest Designers Show, your transparent look into life as a modern designer. My name's Tom Ross, and I'm the founder at designcuts.com. And this week I'm joined by my fellow Brit and hand lettering expert, Ian Barnard, American retro design expert, Dustin Lee, and the ever-talented South African illustrator, Lisa Glanz. This week we are talking all about becoming a brand. Sounds kind of big and scary, but we're going to break it down, as we like to say, and give you those actionable steps and tips on how you can stand out in a noisy online world and build your brand as a designer, as an agency, whatever it is you're working on. So without further ado, let's get into the show.
But wait, some ado.
Okay, what's the ado?
Let's all look. I just want to acknowledge that Tom has officially become an uncle.
Aww.
So congratulations
Yay.
to Tom. Tom is now officially has a what do you call it?
Unclehood?
A nephew.
A niece.
I'm
niece.
sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to thank my brother for doing all the work. I did literally nothing, but I can't wait to meet the little lady. Yeah, Lisa. Yeah. Sorry, that's really got me. Ding. Thank you, Dustin. That's very sweet. So becoming a brand. What do we think, guys? Is this big and scary? Does this mean you got to be like McDonald's or Starbucks or something like that? What does becoming a brand mean? Over to you.
Good question.
Dude, that's deep. What does it mean?
All right, let me define how I think about brand to kick us off. For me, your brand is simply how other people describe or talk about you. And I'm not saying that's like the official definition of branding, but that, in my experience, that tends to be how it plays out. Yeah, it's either how people talk about you or how they think about you. So I know when I think of Starbucks or McDonald's or Coca-Cola, or even, Aaron Draplin, or names and people that are brands and companies that are brands, I have like certain emotions which come up when I think of all those different things. They conjure different feelings, different kind of visual and emotional associations. And if I describe them to someone, I generally will describe them in that way. I think Apple is like a great example of a successful brand. And on paper, their technology is not like that mind-blowing. They're kind of known for being more like cool and disruptive and that kind of thing. I generally wouldn't grab a friend and be like, you'll never guess what, like this company just released a piece of technology that's like 3.13 gigahertz, whatever. Like, you can tell I'm not a tech nerd. But you know what I mean? I wouldn't be breaking down like the hardware or something like that. I would be talking about them in a certain way. And my friends and I would think about them in a certain way. And
it's like the
kind
cool factor.
Brand. Yeah. And I mean, that cool is one angle, but it can be all kinds of stuff, right? It can, a company could be associated with like charitable giving, or being super nice, or being kind of a dick. That could be a brand.
Which is scary.
It could be 1,000 things. And I think as designers, we can generally do quite a good job, hopefully, with our clients when it comes to their brand. But often I've seen designers neglect their own brand to the point of not having one.
Isn't it a case of, I think designers probably fall into the trap of thinking more about, the brand is how it looks. Because, of course, that is a part of it. But it's not only that, as you just described. When you think of Apple, when you think of all those companies, it's a feeling. It's a perception. It's how you relate to them. It's how they make you feel. And, what they stand for or don't stand for. And I think possibly that designers and creative people don't necessarily think about that side of the branding. They just think about, what's my logo going to look like? What font am I going to use? But all those things actually contribute to these feelings and perception and personality of your brand.
Absolutely. And that's what we get into for clients. If you're doing a good job and you're doing the audience profiling and really getting to know their business and who the intended viewer is going to be, as you say, the fonts and the colors and all the design work is going to be built around the intended like brand persona.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people listening will know this stuff, but then when it's like, what's your brand? They'll be like, I don't really have one. I'm just, I'm Tom the designer. That's my brand.
Here's my business card and the logo.
Yeah, genericdesigner.com.
Tom,
Yes.
could you break down what your brand is then?
Break it down.
Break it down. Break it down.
Yeah, I can, but then I want to fire this back at you guys because I think you're going to be more applicable because, I mean, do you want like Design Cuts' brand or my personal brand?
Your personal brand, I think.
Okay. So I would say my personal brand is based around the name of my show, which I'm doing, which is the Honest Entrepreneur Show. You can tell where I got the inspiration for that, I'm sure. And that I'm doubling it as like my show's name and my new podcast name, but also how I'm perceived online. And so it is in much the same vein as this show. It will be very like open and transparent and human and honest about this stuff, not trying to hide behind fluff, just trying to bring as much value and truth to the table as possible and not trying to like mislead anyone. And so that's kind of become my brand, and that then gets painted in everything I do. It gets painted in the content that I'm putting out. It gets painted in like the podcast artwork and some design things that I'm using, and like, you know, the soft typefaces that I use, and how I deal with people and how I interact, my bio description on Instagram, and all of that stuff should be like consistent and congruent to create a consistent, congruent brand through all those different touch points with me. Yeah. And so I want to push back and be like, for the three of you guys, because I know what the answer is, I think, or I certainly know how I describe you to other people. I'm like, Dustin's kind of that broody, mean guy on the podcast. And, you know, you've all got your brands in my eyes. What would yours be? This would be an interesting exercise for the listeners. Like, how sure are we of our own brands?
Well, I mean, I don't know. Do you want to go first, Ian? Because I feel like I always have so much to say. Sorry.
It's because it takes, my mind's like a really old car that might take a few turns to get up to speed.
And you, Dustin?
Are we talking about our brand as a person?
It can be anything. I would say maybe retro supply in your case.
Oh, yeah.
But I suppose that's easier, I suppose, for it.
Well, let's not give him a hard time. Let's yeah, but like, how would you describe your brand for Retro Supply?
I don't really know. You know, I thought that it was like, when I made the name, I thought it was self-evident what the brand was through the name. But more, you know, like, I find it's kind of like, you know, always showing you guys all these random magic tricks or weird things I collect and find interesting. Sometimes I feel like Retro Supply is more me collecting things I find interesting.
Yeah.
I think
it's awesome.
Would it be helpful if we maybe the other three people described what they think the brand is of that person as a starting point? So this can even be just stuff that we associate with them. So, for example, when I think of Retro Supply, I think, you know, obviously quality, obviously going very, very narrow on the retro thing where everyone else tends to dabble in all kinds of stuff. I feel like it's just a place to completely geek out over anything retro. I think of how amazingly branded the previews are on what you guys put out. I think that's like a real standout thing. When I think of the mass of people selling retro goods online, you really stand out in my mind because of how you present them and put them together. And I think that's awesome.
And for me, I think it feels like that you know exactly who your customer is and you appeal to your customer in the exact way that you, or that the customer would want to, you know, be appealed to. That was terrible English, but you know what I'm trying to say.
I do.
Like,
Yeah.
I there's a couple of friends that when I was a graphic designer, and I could literally pinpoint, you know, out of the group who would be so interested in your products because it's the type of person that they are. It's the kind of things that they design and the things that they're attracted to. They're like, they'd be sold kind of thing. So it's so awesome to see a brand that clearly understands who their customer is. And I feel like you do. I feel like it's like a no-brainer. And I think that's quite a strong thing to do, a strong thing to have.
Yeah, and it might just seem like, oh, it just kind of naturally happened that way and that's all good. But imagine if Dustin was representing Generico design company,
Yeah.
You'd have that group of friends and you'd have no idea who was a good fit or really what they offered or what made them unique. So it's not like maybe it is a happy accident, but I mean, it's been done well. How you brand it.
I think it feels. Anything's easy once you do it for a while, right? I mean, very few things are hard after you do them for a while, so it's easy to pick stuff and do things for the business now. But I remember when script lettering and hand-drawn scripts became so big, they were just dominating. And I thought about changing the business. I thought maybe I should start making some scripts because those are what were making money. And then I decided to double down. I just said, well, here's the time. You either are going to double down on this retro thing or you're going to start doing scripts and watercolors and all these different things. And I just thought, I just cannot imagine having my heart in it. I don't want to be I don't want to find myself 3 years later down the road doing watercolors and scripts. Yeah. And that really that informed a lot of decisions. It was like a little moment that informed the rest of the business's life.
Yeah. So I'd say part of your brand is having a real passion as well for that stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. I love that stuff.
So, from my opinion, sorry if we're still going off somewhere else, because I've known Dustin the longest, because me and him were we started our shops at a very similar time. Man and boy.
We know you've got a little bromance, okay, mate? Don't rub it in.
But what really I loved about what Dustin did was he made me fall in love with retro yesterday, like the yesteryear illustrations with today's technology. So it's like a little strapline, like falling in love with yesterday's, with yesteryear, and through his copy, his really well-written copy, that if you weren't blown away by his previews, then you read the copy and then you were like, I just can't help it and buy it.
Yeah. Oh, man. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic description. And people might struggle. So they're like, okay, well, great for Dustin. How do I apply that to myself? I think there's so much power in going, this is kind of part of niching, which we've talked about, but whatever your offering is, I love when brands go all in on that. So Dustin, you're kind of retro. Imagine if someone went even more specific and they became like the Victorian era design resources.
Oh yeah. I mean, we go pretty deep in mid-century American. So yeah. I mean, some people, do Victorian, or like Hustle Supply does like the old beer labels and whiskey labels from the turn of the century.
Exactly. And so imagine if you did go Victorian era and suddenly the language you used in every email was like, I'm going to murder this, but if it's like, great Scott, old chap, like, how do you do this fine morrow? And like everything was written, not that Victorians talk remotely like that, but
I like it though.
But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the same way, I think we gave this as a hypothetical example. I'm sure it probably exists by now. But we were like, if you're the design doctor who is going to always be rebranding and redesigning people's stuff that's kind of broken, and you're going to fix it up and make it good as new, then every advert you put out, every leaflet, every email, every social media post, every bio description, your website, it can all be kind of written and designed around that concept. And so instead of saying like, I have redesigned services available now, you can be like, you can get like the sticking plaster package, or like, the complete, like, I don't know.
You could go down that road so much though, because like you could have a YouTube channel where people submit stuff that they're struggling with, like you would, like a general, GP would, or one of those doctors that cases for everything, and you could sort of like take it and then do a series of critiques on it and stuff like that to help them, and you could just like even your like all your props, you could go and
massively
buy it from like a surgery stuff, and have a skeleton in the back.
We've got Scott, who you guys might know from CircWorks. He did like the robots and aliens packs and all that kind of stuff, and zombies. And they're awesome, but his whole brand is like the mad scientist. So he's got a YouTube show where he's got exactly that. He's got a backdrop where he's built a set and he wears a lab coat and he's like got crazy hair and he's like like just kind of ranting about this stuff. And it's so good and it's so memorable. And I think that's the thing that I love about brand the most, because you like the sky's the limit, your imagination is the only limitation, and you can push the creative boundaries so far. And the best thing for me about branding is how memorable it makes you, because there's millions of designers and creatives out there, and we're all competing in some way or another. And so for someone to be able to say like they've got a mate and they're like, oh, I need a design, and it's like, oh, who can I recommend? It's that guy who I think does websites over there. Or it's like, oh yeah, the design doctor. They sprung straight into my mind. And when you have such a brand that you've committed to so strongly, you will generally always pop into people's heads like top of the list when they try and recall someone.
A great non-design example of this is, are you guys familiar, if you're not in the States, with Mr. Rogers?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, no. I didn't know if that was just an American thing.
What is it? It is, but I know about it.
Mr. Rogers. So, if anyone doesn't know who Mr. Rogers is, he was, I don't know what, 60s, 70s, 80s, had a television show on public broadcasting, and he was a minister, ordained minister, I believe, and he ended up doing a television show where he talked about kids' feelings. This show, there's a fantastic documentary out about it now, but this show looks like it's so niche that you would only see it in a child therapist office being played for kids. It's not big cartoons or anything like that. It's an older gentleman talking very gently about emotions to kids. And I think, and Tom, tell me if you agree. Have you seen the show?
Tiny clips, and I know they're doing a kind of modern reimagining in the series with Jim Carrey, I believe.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Oh, and they have a cartoon called Daniel Tiger where they kind of took his thing on. But he just he's so consistent in it, and he so believes in it that I think it just becomes, it's like, it's so niche, but it becomes so open because you can tell he cares about children so much that it's turned into that. And I think that kind of ties into, you have to have some love for what you're doing in some way. Don't have to. Mr. Rogers dedicated his life to this. You don't have to do that, but you have to love it to some degree, I think, to really integrate that.
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. And I think the loving it part also helps you come up with the ideas without having to struggle to find them, or finding ways that are authentic to your brand, because it's just a part of you. It's something that you enjoy doing so much, and it's so natural to you that you don't really have to think too hard to implement it. So yeah, that would be a good way to get unstuck.
Yes, and I think when you confidently commit to this core brand concept, you will get so many things splinter off of that in terms of the inspiration, whether it is for work you can do for your clients or content for social media or whatever it might be. But let's say you, Lisa, yours, I would say as a brand, is very much this kind of whimsical, charming, cute style. And out of that, you can literally spider diagram and be like, okay, so what other feelings and concepts does this evoke? And for me, it evokes a kind of like childlike nostalgia. It evokes an imagination, and your imagination running riot and that kind of thing. And so straight away from that, it starts to feed to more ideas. So it's like you could start a weekly show. If you were thinking, I want to do a YouTube show or an Instagram show every week, what's it going to be about? You could do like Imagination Tuesdays and take people like into your world and just kind of brainstorm with them, or show your process of doing that and inspire people with just how you come up with your cool ideas. And that's all going to fit within your brand. Whereas if you went and did something that was completely off brand, just because you're like, well, everyone over there is doing that, so I guess I should kind of put out content like that.
Absolutely, and it also it would be more it would be heavier in terms of, it would be more difficult for me to actually pull it off, because I would struggle to actually, find it easy to go with the flow with it, and it would be so much more effort, and before you know, you're just not keeping up with it, and the consistency is low because you're just actually not enjoying it. So it's
Mhm.
got to be. It's like what you're saying, Dustin, with your little trinkets that you find, and it's like interesting to you already. So I mean, your work's kind of like half done anyway. From
Yeah.
the exciting point of view. It's the same with me with my brand. Although it was organic in its way, in many ways, it was kind of, I had kind of an idea of where I wanted to go with it, but it did evolve more and more, and it was only based on the fact that it is who I really am, and I do have this weird imagination, and
Mhm.
I like to be upbeat in my work, so it's all kind of flows naturally, and I think that's quite important. I think if you try and push a concept that you fully don't believe, and you kind of don't live in a way, then it becomes difficult.
Don't you find like so many people are just floating around though? And I bet there's
Yeah.
thousands of people listening right now who are just thinking, okay, well, that sounds nice. And I've been there. I've been in that earlier stage of my career where I was just floating around. Like, I don't really know what I stand for. It's the same way as developing a style of work
So
visually,
true.
and you
Yeah.
feel so unclear about it and so generic. And it's only
Yeah.
through kind of putting in that time and a degree of introspection that you land on something.
Absolutely. I mean, the first website I put up, I mean, if I just think about it, I want to die from embarrassment. And thank God nobody knew me. But the point is that the first one I put up, it was terrible. It wasn't what my brand is today. But I started, and that's the thing. You have to start somewhere. And just by committing every day to building your career, your brand, who you stand for, what you stand for, your work, it all adds up. And eventually, over time, before you know it, like 3 years, you look back and you go, wow, I've come so far. So
Hmm.
it
And
is what you said.
That's kind of the crazy thing about brands too is
Mm,
I um, I've seen so many people who are trying to start brands. They spend so much time trying to hone in on this brand, and they're making the graphics and
and
working on the
perfect.
website. They're like, I'm going to
Yeah.
get this other part done as soon as I figure this part out or get this just right. And anytime I look back on any site, and if you want to, you can look at my site or any site you want to with a site called, I think it's called waybackmachine.com.
yeah, I
You,
love that site.
yeah, and it will show you what sites looked like in the past. And I mean, any site, even the most greatest site today, starts looking embarrassingly bad. And I have no doubt at
Mm.
the time that in many of those cases, they thought it looked pretty good. I mean, I know I thought mine looked pretty good. I look back now and I'm like, wow, why did anyone ever buy anything from me? Um, so it's weird. I mean, I don't know if branding's like this weird living thing, and it starts out kind of not perfect and grows and cleans itself up and adjusts. And
Yeah, but it's as you said, Tom, it's like finding your style. You only really get comfortable. It's like, Dustin, you were saying, like it becomes easy now for you to make decisions, for your brand, because you know it so well. But you didn't always feel that way. And it's like with anything, with your style, finding the kind of work you want to do for clients, you have to do a whole lot of work to figure out what it is that you enjoy doing.
Yeah.
And I think people get too stuck on the beginning phases, and wanting it to be perfect. And the only way you're going to reach perfection is to actually do it. Well, not that you
yeah,
ever reach perfection, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Hmm.
So it's, yeah.
So a couple of things that just popped into my head actually. I think one is that when you have that strong brand, it's much easier to get PR in any kind of form. So not just
Mm.
getting referred clients, but like getting featured on podcasts, conferences, even TV shows. They're going to be much more likely. I'm going to keep running with this example, but like they're going to be more likely to have the design doctor on. Like a
Yes.
TV producer would freaking love that. Let's get you in the white jacket and all the rest of it, and
Mm.
lab coat or whatever, and run with that. And the second thing is I completely forgot because I'm really tired and my brain's gone too much today. I was going to say though, could we maybe? Oh yeah, okay, I got it. So got there in the end. So I also think that you can kind of have mini brands within your brand. So like when we talked to Lauren Hom
Mm.
and she had lettering for lunch. that is still something that's quite brandable. It might not be everything she's doing, but it's like that kind of sound bite, right? It's memorable. You can tell people about it. So you can actually brand projects as well as your whole operation. And
Good idea.
I love this stuff. I think so few people are actually doing it. I literally think like 99.9% of people just never really get any kind of brand, and when they do, it's something super generic. And it might sound cheesy, but I think there's endless variations. So it doesn't just have to be the design doctor. Like something that just popped in my head, I'm like, what if it was you're like the Robin Hood of design, in that you're taking the stuff that works for the really big companies that normally designers would charge a fortune for, and you're getting all that really, really kind of high-end stuff and providing it at an affordable price for like smaller clients. So it's like you're taking from the rich and giving to the poor. That would be a cool one.
Yeah, or a great way to do this that I had read about somewhere was look at a brand you really enjoy, a completely unrelated, different field, can still exist, maybe it doesn't exist, and then say, what if that brand existed in this space? And then go with that.
Great idea.
What if P.T. Barnum, I don't know, made soft drinks? What if Apple made toilets? They probably are going to, but like, what if they did right now?
Yeah, that's
I don't even
great.
know what toilets are going to be. Yeah, Apple toilets are going to do. Anyway.
I would like someone to come up with like the design builder, and then they build it.
Yes. Oh, no, but that is one, and you can brand the whole thing. So it's like you could put that into your PDFs of what your process is like. That kind of intro for clients. It's like, first we're going to look at the foundations and assess like the lay of the land. Then we're going to build up these basic structures, and then we're going to add the details, and then you're going to be left with this shiny looking house at the end, which is going to be your finished project. You can illustrate that whole thing. And along those lines, I think what's so powerful with branding, and this is in terms of fully committing, is when you weave it through everything. So it will be in that welcome PDF, but equally it will be, if you've got an email newsletter, when someone hits unsubscribe, even the message there is not like the MailChimp default, like, you've been unsubscribed from this list. It's super lame. I love when people weave the brand into every little point. So even when you unsubscribe from their newsletter, you get something, say it's the builder, and it's like them holding like a wheelbarrow or something with like the sun setting behind them. And it's like, sorry to see you go, but we hope you'll come back to the building site another day or something like that. You can have fun with that stuff.
There's a name for that. They call it, I believe, heuristics, or there's something called, I think that's how you say it, heuristic auditing, which is essentially if you just go through your site and do every type of transaction. So if you're a designer, go through your site and use the contact form to get in touch. Then see what the response email is. What happens when the contact thing pops up? What happened? I mean, just try everything. So like I had recently done it. And like you're saying, Tom, it helps you see all those touch points that you missed. I did it for my site. I couldn't believe how many places the site was crazy. It was just...
Yeah, because it's so off-brand. If they get this lovely retro experience and then they hit like buy on a product and then it's like transaction completed from like a default Shopify message or whatever, it sucks and it really jars people and it breaks the illusion. It's like when you watch a movie and you get immersed in it. Someone's immersed in the experience of your brand, and then suddenly it's like, oh no, that woke me up in a bad way.
Well, like here's one like a classic one that we just like, I think we've finished fixing, or maybe there's one more part to do. But lots of times people have transactional emails, whether you're a designer or you're selling products or you're doing whatever, you send transactional emails, whether it's an invoice or whether it's a receipt or a download for a purchase. Lots of times those come from a company that is a third-party provider of that service for you. And the email does not look like every other email you've sent the customer. And like you said, Tom, it breaks the illusion all of a sudden because like no one put the effort into trying to like make that feel like the rest of the experience. They get all these nice, comfy, bunny messages from Lisa say, and then all of a sudden this like crazy robotic transactional thing comes in and is like, click here to download. This is not this is not an email that like address that gets responded to. Please do not click reply. And you're like, what happened?
Yeah, and so imagine if it was like, click here to get your charming goodies. Your little bunny friends can't wait to meet you, or whatever you go with, right?
Yeah.
Like
click here for bunny memes.
Yeah. Like the difference in experience there is monumental.
Yeah.
And it's like, what about when a client is on your site and they go on the contact form to like try and get in touch and hire you, and then you hit submit and they get a super generic like email received
Thank
kind of
you
thing.
for yes.
That's another touch point. That's a perfect opportunity to weave your
Yeah.
brand in. And I've been helping some of my followers with this stuff recently, and one of them is redesigning her website. Actually, Teresa, who South African
yeah.
Teresa, who we were
Mhm.
helping on the show
Yes.
a while back, and her new site looks awesome. But her brand is all about like really personal, bespoke, like customer care and how she looks after her clients. So I'm trying to help her weave that through everything, because you better believe if she gets a touch point like that and someone hits a contact form and then it gets a jarring impersonal message, it's going to be like, oh, that's going to leave a sour taste in the mouth, and they're not going to look forward to hearing back from her as much as if that brand gets woven in and the whole journey through is like super nice and customer friendly.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
Here's another rant. This is like a project one. If you're single and you're a hand letterer, you could do something like lettering for love. And then every piece you put out could be like describing traits that you want to see in an ideal partner. And
That's cool.
that would be a kind of thing where it's like, it's another lettering, profile on social media, snore. That would be something that people would remember. They'd find like it had a little hook. It's entertaining. It's more shareable.
Unless they found love straight away, and you're like,
yeah.
Well, that's the end of that.
And then it just becomes sickening. Then it's just describing their partner. Their eyes are perfect. It's like, yeah, no one cares. Get back on Tinder.
I have a question for you guys about your opinions about this for branding. So if you were just to look up, how do I brand myself, or how do I brand my graphic design studio? I mean, anything like that. You're obviously going to see tons and tons of blog posts come up, articles, whatever. Some of them are going to be really good from people you've heard of, who maybe are your heroes. And there's going to be so much good advice. There's going to be list posts. There's going to be videos. There's going to be webinars. There's going to be downloadable PDFs. And everyone is going to have advice that as you look at it, it's going to start to conflict with each other. It's going to start to turn into hundreds and hundreds of different things you could do.
So
Next
just
thing
listen
you know,
to
you're
us,
like,
right? Instead.
yeah.
yeah, well, that's kind of the question I'm getting at is, this happens to me all the time with like looking at marketing stuff. You start to be like, well, this person said this. I really trust them and think they're pretty cool. But this person said this, which is completely against that. And I really like them and trust them. How do you decide? How do you cut out everything so you can move forward? Because if you try to check off everything on the Google results, you'll die before you release your brand.
Okay, I would say, honestly, do listen to us, because I promise we know what we're talking about. And let's try and distill down, because we used to do this all the time where we'd be like, here's action points of what to do. So here's an action point. Like, think of something that like makes you stand out, that kind of differentiation, being a bit disruptive like that, and isn't super generic. And don't be afraid to kind of go all in on that. So whether it's the Robin Hood of design, or the design doctor, or the lettering mad scientist, or whatever ties in with your brand, or the whimsical cute person, like fully commit to that, because no one likes it where it's half baked and you're just kind of toe in the water. And you've got a couple of lines of text on your website that allude to that being like you. But actually, when I meet you on a call, like Lisa, knowing you, if I went on your website and it wasn't like all cute and whimsical and wonderful and imaginative, there would be a real disconnect in knowing you. And I see this all the time. I'm working with a bunch of people right now, helping them with this stuff. And I hate it, because I jump on the call and be like, what are you doing? Like, you're the coolest person ever. And I go on your website and it's super generic. Like, don't stop holding back, and don't be afraid to put that into your brand, into your website, like into your social media. Like, go more all in on it. So that would be number one. And I would like to think that's pretty indisputable.
Yeah. I mean, it's, and you go.
I was thinking you could do, write, a list of the things that you think maybe you're most skilled at. So I got a diagram on my phone. I was reading this book, one of the 99U Behance, Scott Belsky ones, and to find your like purpose, which I suppose encompasses some of this, it was like, write down like a list of your skills that you're maybe qualified in, or the things you feel you're good at, and you know, those ones that you do like, and then do a list of all your interests that have nothing to do with design. And then that could be like, you know, that's trying to sort of like join them together. And so not join them together, just see what you could make of it, whether that's like you say, the Robin Hood of design, or whether it's like you like maybe like professional wrestling, like WWE, and you could brand your interest, you know, you take your interest in that and use that as a branding tool for the skills that, you know, maybe you're building websites, and you could be the, you know, you can make up this name that encompasses websites or web, you know, in that sort of wrestling theme. I think because the, you know, the marketplace is quite crowded, you want something that people can, you know, like you say, hang on to. And
I think that's great. Imagine if there was someone doing like super clean, like beautiful design work, but they looked like a heavy metal dude. that would be great. I'd freaking love that. I'd like the comedy and how incongruous that would seem would be awesome.
Yeah, it's like when you see someone looks like punk rocker and they listen to classical music, and you're like, whoa, I was so wrong about you.
Yeah, it's like I misjudged you.
I mean, it's going back to that whole finding your purple cow and then using it to your advantage, and actually making it interesting so people don't forget you, because that's really what branding's job is meant to do, isn't it? Otherwise, we'd all just look generic. So it's you've got to, as you said, Tom, you got to go full on, and you want people to. I mean, well, the way I see it is that, well, that was kind of like my feeling or intention behind my website, for example. I wanted people to have an experience, you know, when they arrived, and from beginning to end. And I think that's the purpose of a brand. It's about how people feel about you and how they remember you. And you've got to, like, as you said, go all in. And what's it like for them coming to you? How they're going to feel about it? What do they go through? What do they feel? What do they see? You know, that's, you got to think of all these things. Otherwise, you're just going to be another Joe on the street, and they're just going to the next.
And I would say you've got to like pick something on an edge, like Tom's talking about. You got to choose. I'm going to be this person. This is like a very different thing. If it's not something that's like you know, like Seth Godin always says, remarkable, like quite literally something to remark about. If it's not something crazy, or not crazy, but remarkable, then rethink it until it turns into something where people are commenting on it, and then just do it. Because remember, you can always change. I think people always feel like somehow there's some sort of agreement in life where you have to agree to be that person for the rest of your life.
Forever.
Like, think about the Beatles, man. The Beatles started as like, you know, like a boy band. You know, they started playing these like boy band songs and like merchandising themselves and selling themselves out. And then like they were like these, a couple years later, there's like psychedelic LSD taking, like, you know, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, Day in the Life, like crazy stuff. And then a couple years later, like they're these like long haired like hippies, like, you know, like fighting like with John Lennon, you know, against like for women's lib and like against Vietnam and stuff like that. I mean, the biggest band in the world did it. They started as a boy band. They ended as a bunch of hippies, like making music on a roof, like smoking cigarettes. I mean, you could change whenever you want. So just commit to something and be it. But like, I mean, the Beatles were great at that. I mean, they committed to all those things. They're like, hey, I'm the walrus. How crazy is that? Who would think that's even a good idea to be like, I'm the walrus? It's so crazy. But like, at least they committed to it, right?
Yeah, I love that example.
Got myself a little excited there.
Hey,
excitement is good.
Okay, okay. Say, here you go. Give us like think. Okay, you know, I'm not a letterer, and Dustin's not doing retro supply, and Lisa's not doing her cute rabbits, and Tom's not doing his entrepreneurial. Say we're all designers, and we're just in the moment, which is very generic. We're just doing everything quite generic.
Hold on, what's your name? You're a designer. You're generic, Mr. Designer. What's your generic name?
What's my generic name?
Yeah.
I know. Brian.
Generic Joe.
Brian. Oh, sorry to any Brians listening. I think Ian just inferred you had a generic name there. The Brians of the
I knew
listenership.
that was going to be.
They're going to rise up. You're going to have Brian tweeting you.
You just got unfollowed by about 3,000 Brians.
Okay, so my interests are. I'm trying to think. Actually, what are my interests?
My interests are bread and newspapers. Are we going generic or boring?
Okay. Say it's skateboard. Not that I do much skateboard. I love skateboard boards. I don't do much skateboarding. Okay,
Yep.
say I'm Brian the designer and I love skateboarding.
Yep.
I'm putting it out there so you can have a think of how you could then, I'm just trying to, I put it through the stages, so we can say, okay.
But I also think it's important to tell us your style of design, because I think that plays a role.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, I'll give you an example for me. If I was, starting out, I love dancing and I like drawing cute sort of animals. So you could, I could have a whole theme on my website of this cute little dancer that takes you through the little stages, of my shop and what I do. And, I could use the whole like dancing theme from beginning to end.
Yep.
But because that ties in with the work that I do.
Yeah.
So
and, if we're going with Brian the skateboarder,
yeah,
I'm thinking like you could have on your about page or something. You could have like a video, or an animated GIF or something where you're there on a skateboard, like going across the screen, and under your arm you've got a big portfolio saying like design work on it or something like that. And so you're like skating to a client with that, and then you can like have plays on words. So with the contact page, you could say like drop in for a chat or something, and show like the skate ramp where someone would drop in on that. Like there's endless variations, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Because I was thinking before I started lettering, I was really generic. The stuff
That's
was
so generic to say.
I know.
Oh, sorry, Ian. All right. Here's another thing. Like, even if you don't like push it through every little nook and cranny of your website, just openly talking about it in your content makes you more memorable as a brand. So, to give you an example, I know Gary Vaynerchuk.
Mm.
I know some weird stuff about that man from his content. So everyone knows that he loves the Jets. He's like a diehard Jets fan. He wants to buy them one day. It's like his biggest love in life, and he supports them all the time and wears like the Jets jerseys and that kind of thing. That makes him more nuanced and unique and memorable than Joe Blogs, the entrepreneurial influencer. There's stuff which is less well known, but he's still putting his content. Like he loves bananas, and he used to be on Snapchat, like literally like munching down a banana in about 5 seconds flat. And I've remembered that, and that paints like a more multifaceted personality. So even if you're not like putting skateboarding metaphors on every line of text on every bit of your website, simply having, you could have that in your profile picture, and that'll make it more memorable. You could put in your bio section, I love design, I love helping my clients, and I'm also like the biggest skateboarder in the world, like, and weaving it through that way. And you could put stuff on your Instagram stories. So I'll give you another example. There's a personal trainer who's like now quite influential online called James Smith that I follow. Any of you guys know him?
Mm-hmm.
So he's known for, he'll do videos where he'll like call out people who are pushing bad quality products online, like weight loss supplements and fake products like that. And he'll call them out publicly, so to almost shame them and stop them doing this, because it's really damaging for the culture. He'll like openly like swear quite a lot and be quite crass in his videos, and he just doesn't care. And he obviously knows what he's talking about. And for all these reasons, that becomes his brand. But equally, part of his brand is that he regularly shares how he'll like work remotely around the world and travel the world with his mates while he's putting out content, and that he wears budgie smugglers all the time. So he'll be going around in these tiny Speedos, and that he skateboards everywhere. And he's regularly on his Instagram stories giving advice while he's skateboarding down the street, the same way Dustin is now on his booster board. And all these little things, they actually become part of your brand, because if Dustin never put out a jot of content, never shared anything about himself, he would simply be Mr. Retro, which is already better than like Mr. Generic Designer. But now I'm like, okay, I know from Dustin's content that he's got a boosted board and that he rides around doing that stuff. And I know that he's a family man, and that becomes memorable to me. Like all these little bits form in my conception of Dustin. They form when I think of someone. If someone's like, I need someone like that, or like, can you recommend anyone, or can you describe this person to me? All of these little things would go into my description of Dustin.
Well, and yeah, and so a lot of it. Well, no. I guess I should say an example that's proven to like work. For instance, is I wear hats constantly ever since my hair started to recede, and it's okay. You can laugh. I was joking.
I did laugh.
I know.
Oh, we're all cracking up.
It seemed very stifled, like it was a sensitive subject or something.
Yeah, I started laughing. I thought, oh hell, what if it's like, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
No, we've actually never seen the top of Dustin's head.
Never.
And you never will.
Permanently covered.
It's just a shoe horse of hair around the sides. No, I do have hair on my head, but it's thinning. But anyways, so I'll wear lots of times but one of those, like, I don't know, newsboy caps or whatever. I can't remember where I got the idea of wearing one of those. I just started wearing it one day, I think in a band maybe, and I started wearing it all the time. And when I go to conferences and stuff, it's so easy. I mean, who wears those? Like, probably some people think it's pretty stupid. Some people think it's maybe pretty awesome.
I didn't
Some people think I look like a newsboy.
Like,
Yeah.
honestly,
Yeah.
I was so
I
used
wouldn't
to
know
it.
who you are without a hat.
And when I go to a conference, almost always I wear it because it's like putting a little flag on top of my head that makes it obvious who I am. So, I mean, little thing, yeah. For sure.
Well,
things like
perfect
that.
example, right? I went to the Future meetup in London this weekend, and it was super fun. And I was chatting with Chris Stowe there, and he had his baseball cap on, which
Flat
he wears.
cap.
Yeah, the flat cap, which he has all the time. He wears it all the time, like in all his podcasts, and his
One that
content
says
and his
type on
social
it.
media. I think he's got a few, but just the very
Okay.
fact he's wearing one, you can
Yeah.
spot him a mile off. That's become part of his brand, the same way that Aaron Draplin looks like this big trucker dude, and he always wears a cap and kind of similar clothes and that kind of stuff. That's part of his brand, and that might sound kind of ridiculous, but it's so
no, but
true.
it all adds up.
If like
Yeah.
every time Aaron Draplin, for example, went out in public, he wore something completely different. So it was like one time he had a cap on, next time he didn't, next time he wore a suit. It wouldn't be as ingrained in people's minds, but I guarantee if you said to anyone that knows him, Aaron Draplin, they'd visualize the same thing that we are.
Yep.
If Aaron Draplin went to a business meeting and wore a sweater vest and penny loafers, it would be the illusion would literally crumble. Like,
yeah.
you can't. I mean, so I don't know. It's like the whole Shakespeare thing, what the whole world's a stage or whatever, right? Like,
Yeah, and the thing is, like, this is really important on YouTube, is having something that is all like constant in your videos. So whether that is you're wearing a certain hat, whether it's wearing certain clothes, I find I'm not that consistent with mine. I need to.
So we'll just wear the same thing every single day, or let's all buy a cap like Dustin.
But it needs to be like, you can wear the same thing all day, but it needs to be something that, you know, is standoutable. You know,
Yeah.
because I normally wear
So
black t-shirt and grey jeans, and that's not really.
If you got one takeaway, guys, listening to this episode, buy some comical glasses. And I'm not saying you've got comical glasses, by the way, Ian. I'm saying buy like some fake looking glasses and wear them every day, and you're going to stand out.
And but actually, talking about that, I need to get some new glasses at some point. I was thinking of getting like some white frames or something, or a coloured frame.
Oh, here's an example. Casey Neistat.
Yeah.
I guarantee if you said to like millions of people that know him, name 5 things you associate with Casey Neistat, his black Ray-Bans would be up there, right?
yeah. Or Seth Godin, he's got the bright yellow rimmed glasses. I do think there is like some value in things that you can wear regularly, like that are daily things that people can attach to you. I mean, you know, like,
As long as you're changing your underwear daily, that's fine.
Well,
Unless
no,
you're
sorry,
walking around
that's
just
part
your-
of my
but-
brand. Yeah.
Aaron Draplin's always wearing one of his hats. He's always wearing one of those work coats.
Mhm.
You know, plus he's got this gigantic
with a
beard,
field
which never
notes
comes off.
sticking out of his pocket.
Yeah. It's like your what do you call it? Your props.
Yeah, and you don't need to be this huge like celebrity to pull that off. So you guys know Mark from Blue Deer Design. He was at this meetup and he's very good at this. He had this bright blue jumper on with his logo and saying Blue Deer on it. And I saw people literally approaching him and being like, oh yeah, I know you from that, because that's how they know him on social media. And before I gave that example, I was about to say, oh, it's Mark. And then I was going to give his last name. And I was like, oh, I can't remember it. And I think it is Hirons. So I've just about remembered it. But you know what? Like in an instant, I was like, Mark from Blue Deer. That instantly jumped in my head. But if someone was like, do you know a designer that does that kind of work? Which I often get that question. I'm not going to want to be like, oh, it's that Mark guy. What's his name? You know, if he didn't have any kind of brand, I'd be like, oh, I can't remember his Instagram handle. I just won't bother. I won't recommend it. Whereas I'm like, oh yeah, Mark from Blue Deer does that kind of thing. Here's his Instagram. You see the difference?
Yeah. Completely.
I guess the final thing, the final like part of the puzzle of that is if you could do something that's true to yourself, which I think is what we're saying. If you can do something that's true to yourself, but maybe slightly amplified or slightly mutated to draw a little more attention or to make you memorable. And there's like, what's that saying? It's like something like it's, you know, that gets the attention once. If you fail to deliver, then all of that just went down the drain. So you have to deliver once you got the attention.
Yeah. And it has to be authentic. You don't want to become a caricature of someone else. And if Lisa wasn't truly this whimsical, imaginative person, and she was just putting out there because she thought, oh, that's going to be an attention-grabbing brand, then the whole thing would be a sham, and it would crumble pretty instantly. So
and hard work.
Yeah, it would be damn near impossible to live in someone else's shoes like that. So yeah, it needs to be
pouring
authentic.
water into a bucket with a hole in it.
Yeah,
correct.
Exactly. So yeah, it should be true. It shouldn't just be like a gimmick, but I wouldn't. Probably what feels gimmicky to some people is actually smart. You know, like if they're being true to themselves and they have quality to back it up, like I don't give a shit if you want to wear a hat every day, like you know.
When you got to find the handle, you got to find the handle to hold it by. You know, there's one handle that's completely unacceptable or you can't live with, and there's another handle that you can. You know, maybe you can't hold the handle of I'm going to wear, like I wear a newsboy cap, but it'd be hard for me to hold the handle that I like dressing up like the English biscuits guy. I mean, that would be a really hard handle to hold the thing by, but to hold it by the handle of I want to be memorable and I want to be memorable.
You need to say that faster. To hold it by the handle of.
I'm just imagining you getting back from like a conference, coming home to your wife and just being like, "Kill me." I just can't keep this up.
But you get what I'm saying though? Like you can hold it by the handle of you can hold things by the handle of, for instance, I'm being gimmicky in branding, or for instance, lots of people use the excuse when they're trying to make money. I can't make money. Have you tried selling anything? No, I don't like selling. I don't like being salesy. I don't like marketing. I don't like writing sales copy. All that stuff is so gross. You can hold it by that handle, or you can hold it by the handle, you know, like that, you know, Tom holds it by. I'm helping people. It's a much easier handle to grab it by. You know what I mean? So find the handle that you can hold the idea by.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Make it palatable to yourself. Otherwise, you're never gonna commit.
Exactly. Otherwise, you just won't do it.
Tell yourself the story you need to tell yourself.
I'm
serious.
This English biscuit boy, it's gonna help put food on the table for my family. So I'm gonna do it for the next 10 years every day.
I'm gonna end up getting a bunch of English biscuits when I go to this conference.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that.
Like I had this past week, I've had an inquiry and for a well-known brand to employ me to do some veggie calligraphy.
Oh my word! Really?
Yeah.
I love this.
And please let it be a vegetable company. Please let it be a vegetable company.
I can't say anything else to it, but it's like...
It is. That means it is.
Like, but it's like the thing that was just like the purple cow thing, just that sort of for people to notice. And it's not something like I don't want to be the vegetable guy, the guy that does stuff with vegetables.
That sounds bad.
I know. And so...
If Paul can be the walrus, why can't you be the vegetable guy?
I suppose so. It's
If I can be the English muffin guy, why can't you be the vegetable guy?
well, it's not one of my interests.
What do you mean? You don't have a series of
What do you
illustrations
mean?
of vegetables.
Everybody wants to be the vegetable
But I
guy.
find vegetables particularly interesting.
Yeah.
like I suppose for me as a brand is about the experimentation of type. I
Yes.
suppose lettering experimentation.
Pushing lettering to a whole new level.
Yeah,
That's-
it's a different level. I think it's not like
Yeah.
pushing upwards is in terms of quality. It's going outwards in terms of
If you can't go better, go weirder.
yeah. And I suppose that's the thing. It's just that, and it just so happened that one of those experiments blew up.
So you're saying you're not going to be going to any food shows wearing like a celery outfit, doing calligraphy with vegetables for?
Yeah.
There's no amount of money that would make you do that. What's the price?
The thing is, we all
I
have a
want to
price.
see Ian in a carrot suit.
What's the price, Ian? How much?
I don't know actually. I know.
Remember when Lady
So you're saying
Gaga
there's
showed
a
up for that
price.
award ceremony and she wore meat, like a meat dress? That could be Ian. He could have a vegetable suit.
We've all got our price.
Or you could do a Morrissey and just have a stick of celery somewhere and swan around with that.
I did reply back in a jokey way to the person. I said, as a professional vegetable calligrapher.
Yeah.
Because, so, it's not like, it's cool that I've got a job doing it. It's not something that I want to pursue as my full-time gig as doing. That's all I want to do.
Put that iPad down, son. Pick up a
Yeah.
carrot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stop playing with your vegetables.
Everybody's using iPads these days. Just use vegetable. Use what do you call it? Roughage.
Oh, I got an idea. Why don't you do a piece talking about like getting your 5 a day, and for different parts of the words or different words, you use a different vegetable.
There you
Or
go.
piece of fruit.
That is-
5 a
Or fruit.
day.
If I find out that you're turned down an offer from Green Giant, I'm gonna be so upset.
See, yeah, I could just come along and I'd be the Green Giant and I'd just start writing with
Exactly.
Your
Put you on
broccoli soup.
stilts. Have you like doing calligraphy on the side of buildings like Banksy with vegetables?
yeah.
But the thing is, like, if you cared more about vegetables, like if you were a vegetable aficionado, that would be such a memorable brand. And I think if you're doing nothing else day in, day out, you'd be getting booked by every company that had anything to do with that and getting all kind of random appearances in those circuits. You'd be getting like vegan festivals hiring you left, right, and center.
Dude, if you could help my kids to eat vegetables by doing some entertaining videos on vegetable calligraphy, I'd
Okay,
be forever
here's one.
grateful to you.
We could turn it on its head. I dress up as a carrot and then write on the chalkboard behind.
With it, but do you write with a carrot?
No, I'm the carrot. I've come one as
Oh.
the carrot.
Oh, you are the carrot.
Go and
Okay.
get fake tan.
Okay,
I
deal.
love this.
So-
I think if Ian's the pigeon in this scenario, we're forcing him into a very small hole right now, and we intend to keep him there.
You could always make up a pseudonym. Is that what they call it?
Uh-huh.
Like instead of Ian, I don't know, Brian.
Brilliant.
Like no.
What the hell
Which
is
is-
brilliant?
Like broccoli and
I'm just
Ian.
Ian and Bernard
they-
or something like that. Like just make some weird name and then like go around like completely masked in a vegetable outfit and like do calligraphy. That way you can maintain like your integrity, but you can also like do like your pet projects like your professional vegetable calligraphy.
Brian Brobagine.
bro. They could like my like Tom's tribe. You could have
Yeah.
Ian's.
This so good. Oh, please let me do the drawing for this one.
It could be
But then
Ian's
we have to
vegetable
swap.
patch. That could be my audience.
Yes, exactly.
The thing is, my wife loves gardening and doing stuff like that, and I'm like, it's not something that interests me. So yeah, that would, if my interest was like, cultivating the land and growing stuff in the garden, wherever it might be, I definitely be there. And you could even like, there's like shows in the UK, the Chelsea Fowl show, which is like amazing, and you could have that would be really, you could really go all in. But because my interests don't fall there, it would be pushing something that's not, where my heart's not in it.
Yeah, no, I get it. Okay, so at the time of recording this, it will have gone out by this point. But tomorrow, in the Design Cuts forum, we've got James Lewis, who we had on the podcast, coming on to hang out, do some Q&A, and like demonstrate some stuff. So, how do you guys think of James? What springs to mind?
3D lettering.
Yeah, instantly. 3D lettering. Yeah. I can see it. I can see it in my head.
Of logos. 3D lettering, logos.
Logos, exactly. Maybe a secondary thing. This is harder because that's the main thing. What else do you think of? Like, how would you describe James?
Young.
Yeah,
way too young.
Exactly.
To be so like successful.
And we should have done this like as a game almost, but where we wrote it down and then compared. But my two things, I went 3D lettering and young, like in an inspiring way. Like
no, totally inspiring. Yeah, no, Oak is
and that's so funny. We just had exactly the same thing. That for me, to kind of round off this episode, is brand. If you can conjure that, where someone says your name and then people think of certain things that you intended them to think, that is a pretty freaking powerful thing.
And it and it doesn't come overnight. I don't this is not like you'll suddenly do something as the design doctor and everyone will know you as a design doctor. It's being consistent, because like the reason why James is known for that now is because he's been posting regularly, doing the same sort of work over a long period of time. I think he posted today actually his first logo he did of the Supreme logo in 3D, and it was I think about 6 months ago, and since then he's done tons and tons of logos. And it's only because of that he's now well known for it. And then what happens is, especially on social media, is that like something like Insider do a little thing. This guy does 3D hand painted versions of logos, and there's like a little video going through his work and stuff like that. And so it's going all in. Even for like 6 months you'll see some traction, and see if and sort of look at it, audit it at the end of that 6 months and say, actually, is this still aligning with my interests and my skills? Am I pushing enough into it with the that personal side of things that's trying to make me different?
I've got a real good example of this. Someone who I think is nailing the brand game. Do you know Dina at Letter Shop?
Yeah.
So I've been chatting with her quite a lot recently, and she's awesome. And hopefully we can get her on the show because she said she loved to. But with her brand is so many things. Like she is, a great artist. So I instantly think of her work and her illustrations and her lettering. But then I also think about the fact she's big on like body positivity and gender equality and weed. She posts about weed all the time, like smoking weed. And all of these things become part of her brand. The fact that she seems to just not care what people think, and she'll talk how she wants to talk, and she'll swear, and she'll just say whatever she wants. And I get the impression it's really not to get like shock value. It's just because it's who she is through and through, and she's not holding back.
I interviewed her for my podcast. Must have been over a year ago. And the classic thing is like, she just completely goes against the grain of things. She had said, when she was doing lettering, she's like, when I really started to get traction was when I went against the grain, like we're talking about. She's like, I kept seeing lettering pieces that would say things like, the woods are calling, so I must go, or the nature is calling, so I must go. Right. So she like made
just
one that
sounds
was
like you need
like,
the bathroom, but yeah.
There was like, my bed is calling, so I must go.
Yeah,
or
yeah.
something like that. Or my couch is calling, so I must go. Which I
Nice.
think for so many people, they're like, yes, nature is not calling for me.
Well, the same
Mountains aren't calling.
like Callie Hegstrom as well. She does a lot
You
of these
guys are funny.
quotes. You know who I mean, Callie? You guys must know
Yep.
Callie.
Mhm.
Yeah. So let me look up. We're really bad at ending these episodes, but hold on, let me see.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah.
I don't even know what that means. Sorry, I just had a
Yeah,
weird catch.
All
of
right.
the
So look,
laughs.
I just went on Callie's. One of her recent posts says, "Whatever my spirit animal is, it's hibernating," which is awesome.
That's cool.
And like all of her posts are like that. They're kind of like funny and quirky. We had Lauren Hom on as well. So let's look at hers because I forget. Oh yeah, one of hers was like sassy and gassy. And she's like talking about like women farting and stuff, right? So in a sea of generic lettering, she's owning her personality and it's quite like funny and tongue-in-cheek and quirky and that kind of thing. And I've actually been working with her since the show to infuse more of her style into her brand because she wasn't going enough all in on it. And she's really enjoying like seeing some of the results from that. And it's amazing to see she's like taking full ownership of it, but in all these little touch points that we talked about instead of just in her work. And it builds a stronger brand. And that's like the coolest thing to me. So I don't know. I think all these people that we have on the podcast, all the people that you see who are like the headline speakers at Creative South and design conferences, which incidentally Dustin and I are going to. Yeah, we are. And hopefully the other two of you, if you can sort it out, that'd be pretty sweet. But yeah, to any listeners at Creative South, keep an eye out for Dustin and I. We'd love to hang out. But yeah, that's brand.
Woo.
What do we think, guys? Is that time to call it?
I think
Yeah.
people need to think, if they look and think, yeah, maybe it's not really, there's nothing to really hang it on. Yeah, just experiment what is something you're passionate about that can be applied to your design work, that can give it something to just differentiate from
Yeah.
everyone else, really.
And it can even
Mhm.
be like a really quirky thing about your personality. It could be something that you really enjoy doing. It could be a side hobby, anything. It's just something that you think will be memorable for somebody.
So, sorry,
Tom is
I
laughing.
think of this at least
is-
twice a year, and I'm pretty sure I've shared it on the show before. But when you said about doing, and we put out one of these Facebook posts and said like, name something that you really love doing, but you're terrible at. And one of our community just wrote sex with my wife. One of my favorite moments in the history of running our company.
Oh,
Someone
shit.
had just had a bad encounter and just could not keep themselves. restrain
Honestly,
themselves.
well, seriously, that was like 4 years ago. I think of it like at least twice a year.
Dude, some people
Oh,
are
man.
so clever.
Yeah. Clever or honest, but yeah.
Ideally
let's
both.
hope it's just
Sure.
clever.
Guys, thank you so much for listening. As always, I hope you took away some tips. Hope you're feeling more compelled to go and create an awesome brand and go all in and commit to what you're all about. Put that through your work, through your brand, through all these touch points we talked about. I promise you it's pretty fun, pretty empowering when you do. On that note, thanks for tuning in and we'll see you next time. Bye
See
from
you
us.
next time.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode. As always, you can find full show notes over at honestdesigners.com or find us over on iTunes and now Spotify by searching for The Honest Designers Show. And remember, we're now on social media too, if you search for Honest Designers. If today's episode helped you, then it would mean the world to us if you took just a moment to leave us a quick review over on iTunes, as this is one of the best ways for other designers to discover the show. Thanks again for tuning in, and we will see you next week right here on The Honest Designers Show.